Hello, everybody. I gotta tell you, there's been fun and games here in my house and in my surroundings today because last night my Spooky 2 interview got struck. And that's not a good thing because you get 3 strikes and you're down. Okay, and I haven't been struck for a while. So what was happening, it channeled through both, I was channeling it through error as well as solutions. And I got the notification this morning and I just was like, oh my gosh, no. So, but anyway, as it turns out, they've struck solutions and not Aquarius rising Africa. I'm not sure because then they put you on a 3-month, like, you know, you get like a 3, I think it's 3 months. And after 3 months, if you don't get another strike, they'll then clear your record or clear your slate, whatever they like to call it. So I'm not quite
score.
Oh my gosh, but what a day. It's like, oh, you gotta be kidding me, you know. And what again do they strike us for? Medical misinformation. And we all know that those frequencies are definitely not medical misinformation.
No.
So I know also when I interviewed Zandre Buertes, who was the Jabbity doctor expert here in South Africa. I mean, what an amazing woman. They struck me for medical misinformation as well and all sorts of things like that. So anyway, I'm very glad we are on because I thought that we would be streaming on Twitter and Facebook. Only for the next 7 days. So I won't be on solutions. Yeah, for the next 7 days.
This episode is supposed to be on Aquarius rising Africa. Who knows? You know, God works in mysterious ways. What the devil will use for bad, God will use for good. So hopefully, I'm just glad we get to talk about this today because.
Totally. Yeah, very happy to have everyone on Arrow again and very happy to have all your beauties in the chat. Lovely to see all you regulars here as well. And looks like a couple of more Falcons. So I haven't seen you around before. Nice to have you all here. Anyway, so we're talking about humans behaving badly.
Well, you guys, I mean, I feel like this is going to be like an ongoing series because we are in the middle.
I can't stop. It's right in the middle of the Chad Daybell trial right now. And I mean, it's insane, actually, what's going on, you know. And there's, of course, just so much stuff that keeps getting dug up. So yeah, it's very interesting.
My feed now is just all the different, you know, which I love because I'm trying to keep up with it. I feel like I know all the players now in this story, and I've just been so inundated because, as I've said over and over and over and over again, you know, yes. Oh, speaking of Mormons, before I go on, for all the Mormons that have reached out to me, I've got your emails. Thank you so much. I will absolutely be arranged. It's just got Mercury retrograde has been Mercury retrograding and things have been very chaotic. So just nothing bad.
Yeah. Also, Susan, I've actually just sent you an email back. Susan, is that Susan McCombs? Is that you? Also, that actually lives close to Chad Daybell. So definitely going to be chatting with a couple of you guys.
Yes.
And you know, I think it's quite amazing. Oh, and by the way, I've been fasting today as well. And it's literally 10 minutes, so now I have my tea. So you can imagine going through, do you know, just to digress a little bit, talking about the fasting, right? We always talk about the fasting issues. So today I fast from dusk Tuesday till dusk Wednesday. So 6 to 6, I pretty much fast. It just makes it easier. And this morning when I got the notification from YouTube, and it was maybe 10 in the morning. I'd been to the beach swimming in icy cold water. Oh my gosh, that is the best. So I came back all invigorated and I opened up my email and there I'm like, and in that minute I could feel myself getting anxious.
Yeah.
And what was the first thing I wanted to do?
Eat.
Run to the kitchen and make myself a big fat sandwich.
I would have wanted a glass of whiskey. What does that say about me?
I was like, okay. And it was funny because at the time I was actually speaking to Caleb. And I said, this is so crazy because can you believe? And he said, it's funny how that happens, you know, and it just shows you how we cover up our emotions with food. I mean, lots of, I don't have crutches. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I mean, I do drink like socially, obviously. I'll go out. If I go for dinner with friends, I'll have a glass or two of wine, whatever. Definitely, if I'm partying with my ex-school friends or something, for sure, you're going to see me kicking my heels up and having a ball from time to time, most definitely. But it's like, I don't have crutches.
Yeah.
But apparently food, and especially sugary, because then I want to eat sweet. Then I'm looking for something sweet.
It gets your endorphins up, which if you're hit.
Yeah. It's amazing how that happens. Anyway, so I just wanted to actually share that. It was very interesting. So I hope you all that are fasting with us also notice these things that, obviously, and it's funny, on a day like today, whilst I'm fasting, that comes up as well. All this
Well, when they say be careful what you ask. Like if you ask for healing, you're going to get more pain, because that's going to give you the opportunity to heal. If you ask for more patience,
highlight all of that.
It's going to give you opportunities to be patient, So, and that's kind of in line with what we're kind of going to start with this conversation, because as I said, and I'm going to be very careful with my words, guys. So I think as we tell these stories, you guys will know what I'm talking about, because I was telling Shanti as we were going to talk about Chad Daybell's near-death experiences. I don't think he had them. We'll get to that though, and spiritual manipulation. And I was telling Shanti before we came on, that what's so fascinating to me about this case is that this is a Mormon story, but if you take Mormonism out of it, what you're seeing with Chad, the delusions of Chad and Lori Daybell are rampant. They're the same delusions that are in the truther community. And that's been my concern for 3 years now. And there's one thing, a situation that happened, my heart's pounding. I've never talked about this publicly. I just told Shanti off camera, and I'm not gonna disclose the names, guys. I'm not gonna say the names of these people for their privacy. And around 2021, I got a frantic phone call from somebody that I'm still friends with this person, but we had done some work together, and she was just in hysterics crying because she had found out that some other women that we had both worked with in the past had created a Telegram group where they were going on this Telegram channel where they were doing group intimate activities to Jesus.
Self-satisfying. Intimate activities. Let's just leave it right there, so you can go and figure out the rest for yourself. Talk about Delulu. Seriously. Yeah, that is seriously Delulu. It's insane, because I think, Brice, the closer we get to the end of time, so to speak, and when I talk about the end of times, absolutely, I think we understand we're moving from the end of one age and into another. And, really, what I feel is it's the birthing process. Now, ask any woman who's given birth, it's a freaking painful process. Right? And it's not over in 2 minutes. You have your labor pains for, days, weeks, months. Obviously, on a macrocosmic level, it's going to be a lot more intense, and it's going to be a lot longer, right?
Yeah.
So you're having your labor pains as you run up to that. And then you're actually having that birthing process. And then you've got to recover from the birthing process. You need to heal up, and you need to do all sorts of things. So we're kind of in the middle of that right now. So there's lots of seriously people that, the way that the church has deluded us. And this is why I'm so grateful on this channel to have people like Caleb, because who has been, and I say this a lot, he's been in the arcane for many years. And people often get offended by him when he says, I can't believe you guys don't know this stuff. He doesn't mean it in a derogatory way. He's aghast because everyone in the arcane who studies the arcane and the dark arts, so to speak, know how the Bible has been played with, know how the church uses their indoctrination to keep the average person and the average person dumbed down. We know those of us who've been listening to Jesse Zaberta for the past 3 or 4 years, Mormon Church, Catholic Church, Satanist, Masons, Kabbalah, the 5 pillars of the Illuminati. So what part of that are we not getting, if you think about it? Well, so, of course, these churches are all indoctrinated with the same BS. The Masons, or the secret societies, right, the Masonic Brotherhood, it's really, that's the core, that's the yoke. And every other secret society is a leg or a limb from that yoke. They just call themselves different things. They might have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 different practices, and they might have their own colors and their own little dalliances, but really it's coming from the same thing. And we must never ever forget that. And that's why I keep calling at this time for us to really be so discerning, because when you're looking at freaks like Chad Daybell, like Laurie Vallow, like Ruby Frankie, like Jody Hildebrand, there's plenty more. There is plenty
90% of Telegram.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what we were talking about, and I brought up that whole, honestly, for me and Shanti, we're both Aquarians. And one of the things I like about us the most as Aquarians is we are very live and let live people. I don't give a shit what you do in your bedroom, as long as you're not hurting anybody.
Even out of your bedroom, man, just don't hurt anyone.
Yeah, just don't hurt anyone. I don't care. You can, as I've said many times, I don't care. You can worship fairies in your backyard naked for all I care. Sounds like a fun time, but just make sure so if you want to go on Telegram and have these little shows of intimate shows with other consenting adults, whatever, but what scared me was the fact that this group back in this time when I was told this information in 2021, literally believes that they are goddesses. They are Jesus's brides, polygamy, goddesses.
Brides of Christ.
And I'm not going to say any names, guys, but some of these people are truthers that a lot of you have followed and probably still follow. I'm not going to say their names.
Well, I certainly follow one of them on X.
Yeah. So I just want to I'm not going to say their names because they deserve privacy, and I don't want to this is the first time I've ever.
Sure.
This story affected me so deeply that I have never spoken about it online because it was just so. But following what, and I was thinking about it too. I've been listening to a lot of Dr. John talk about the psychology, and I've learned listening to him, because I'm not a psychologist, I actually have more liberty to make speculations because I don't have a license on the line. And and my own study with yoga, and I was telling you, Shanti, offline, what I think the problem is with all these people going into these delusions. And I'm speaking specifically more about the truthers now, because this is our group of people trying to find the truth, trying to figure out what is going on in the world. And I think what happens is there's so many people in the truther community that do not have a sense of self. And so what I'm talking about, guys, I'm not talking about who you are in this life. I'm talking about a sense of who they are within their being, within their soul. When you have a sense of self, you are able to pull back from things. You are able to, if you find yourself, what I think has happened in these cases is that you have a group of people who have realized, and Chad and Lori Daybell, they were part of the prepper. Latter-day Saints, the end of days, they were preppers. They hated the IRS. They believed the government these are a lot of the same beliefs that a lot of people in I hate the IRS too. I'm not a prepper. We have some food in storage, but but to be able to use this story of what's happened to, the victims, Tylee, JJ, Charles Vallow, Tammy Daybell, and so their lives are not lived in vain. We can actually learn from this and see where we need to be careful, because what I think happens when people lack of sense of self, and we see this again with a lot of religions, where people who cannot rest within themselves, they take on, and Yoga Sutras are all about this, right? They take on these identities from religiosity or theories or political parties. They take on this identity. And so what's happened is a lot of people in the truther community woke up to the corruption around us and then quickly found an identity within the woo-woo truther corner of the internet. And that became their identity. And so all of a sudden, They went from waking up, seeing the reality of the world around them, to then jumping into delusion, which to me is a disassociation, right? It's like if you look at like fantasies, for example. Let's talk about this group that's doing what they're doing on Telegram to Jesus. Well, let's look at fantasies, relationships, and just whittling it down to like a relationship, an intimate relationship. Intimate relationships are hard, right? Nobody's going to say that being in a long-term intimate relationship is easy. It brings so much gifts into your life, and it's incredible to have that. We all want that, but it's hard, right? When you are first dating somebody, there's the honeymoon phase and everything's great. Then all of a sudden things get hard and you're vulnerable now because you become intimate with somebody. And when we have to face the reality of relationships, sometimes that's painful. And so what a lot of people do will disassociate to fantasy. Well, the same thing which is what I think these women are doing. They're disassociating to fantasy instead of facing the reality of their own relationships within their lives. Well, if we look at that from a broader world perspective, with a lot of this delusional thinking that we see in Chad and Lori Daybell.
It's coming from churches. If you look at that, that is absolute church indoctrination.
Yeah.
So I think, what I agree with what you're saying, and I just want to chime in here and just add to that, because it's with that sort of thing, I don't see it as maybe, you're gonna get people who are pretty grounded, right?
Yeah.
And they're gonna have their issues in their life, and they might run off having affairs with 10 people, and whatever the case might be. But when you're having this type of spiritual delusion, like seriously, delulu, this is delulu on another level, and where you're actually satisfying yourself because you think you're a bride of Christ, and now you're having
women. Like the O word, exactly. On Telegram.
So you're having
these women are all married.
Crazy.
These women are all married. They all have husbands, and they're sitting on Telegram. I mean, it's wild.
And that's what I'm saying. It's like we have to look at where this is coming from, because this is religious indoctrination. That somewhere, somehow, somebody, I don't care what anyone says. You look at Jody Hildebrand, and you look at the fact that she's been indoctrinated by the Mormon church, and you see her signs, if you will, cutting, not bathing, smelling bad. I mean, those are dead signs, dead giveaway signs of someone who's been badly violated. And I don't want to say she has. I'm just saying that for me would absolutely.
Speculate that probably happened. We can speculate.
Absolutely. So, and I base that upon the fact that I've spoken to a number of people. Again, I'm gonna refer you to my interviews with Asia Rain, who was trafficked through the Mormon church, and she will tell you what the horrors that she went through. She's not the only one. We're listening here to stuff about Joseph Smith, who was doing human trafficking. So that's already. Yeah, that's already, we know it's been happening. And we know, for example, stuff that he was doing was in line with Anton LaVey and all of that, this kind of stuff. So there's definitely lots of indoctrination. And of course, they have it they're going to have the outer cover life, right? Where it's all this beautiful stuff and all the family values and blah, blah, blah. So people get duped. They get sucked in. And before you know it, boom, they're down the slippery slope. And that's where they hit rock bottom and they have no idea what to do. So now they're doing crazy stuff like that. And I'm telling you now, this is the kind of stuff that is indoctrinated by the churches.
Yeah.
And it's not the people. Understand, it's not Christ who I'm blaspheming, yeah?
It's the
not
church.
At all. It's the church, it's the people who impose these indoctrinations, who themselves have been indoctrinated with the satanic bullshit and are now indoctrinating other people. So all we have to do is just be aware of it. And again, it's so important that we don't judge this.
Yeah.
Right? It's such a fine line between observing something and understanding what's right and wrong for you as a person. but that we don't judge it, right? We have no idea what is going on in their heads. And I think more than anything, empathy is required there, because it's crazy.
That's what Dr. John says on the Hidden Truth Crime podcast. Like, we study crimes so we understand ourselves more and we can understand these patterns. It's okay to have fantasies. It's okay to have, you know, a good imagination, but you have to understand reality from fiction. And if you start falling into this path of delusion, in disassociation, into this fantasy world that you've created, where you're some bride of Christ and you're some goddess in the next life, and you were sent here on earth for a mission because you're part of the 144,000 and Trump's your leader, and you're gonna, like, when that starts becoming your reality, then it's time for you to like step back for a moment and literally ground yourself back into your life.
That 144,000 is so completely the opposite to what people think. And I got a clue for you. It's about the chakras.
Exactly.
But anyway, let's not go there.
Congratulations, you're all a part of it. Everyone in the whole world. Like, you know,
yes.
That's what I sit here saying, oh my God, you know, when people disassociate, when they start to cling to their fantasies more than the reality, it's because there's a pain in their reality they don't want to face. But unfortunately, that's part of being, not unfortunately, actually, fortunately, you know, I like to use the noun human. I actually like to turn it into a verb. We came here to human. We're humaning right now. And being part of that, it's like going on a run. We're running. We're creating friction. We're creating these situations that we have to face in order to refine our soul, in order to find that wisdom, to rise above, to be the alchemist, as Shanti says. And when we neglect to do that, it doesn't matter how much you know about the cabal if you have not done any self-work. It doesn't matter what you know. That's EDO. That's outer knowledge. What matters is gnosis. If you want to ascend, if you want to move up in consciousness, it doesn't matter what information you know. It doesn't matter. What matters is your gnosis, your inner knowing, your own sense of self. And I was telling Shanti, the sad thing is, if we took a bunch of quote unquote truthers and said, you can either go through door A, in door A, you're going to get to go in there and see all of the controller members be punished, we'll say, in a very bloody way for their crimes. Or you can go through door B, where you can go through intense healing and learn how to take your power back. Which door do you choose? I guarantee you 99% of the truthers would pick door A, because they have so much pain and rage and delusions within themselves that they would rather watch other people go through violent pain.
Well, they really think that those people are the cause of everything bad in the world. And I'm telling you, and I'm saying, well, yes, we can see it that way, that they have inflicted a lot of pain. And if you look at what they do with kids and animals and innocent women, children, men, same thing. The way they violate everything, absolutely. You know, I've got there's such an in-depth discussion that we can be having around that topic, but I'm definitely not going there at this point, because it's just, I think it's a little bit too much for a lot of people. But what I want to say is that, you know, every person is on their path. So you get to look at that and decide whether that's okay for you or not. If it's not okay for you, then disassociate from that. If it is okay for you, then get involved with that. You know,
going into door B means that you can actually, that's what Shanti and I were talking about. If you want to get rid of the controllers, heal yourself, because that means we all collectively vibrationally move up, and therefore the controllers are still here because we're still stuck in our pain. It's magnetizing. Like attracts like. So if we want to get rid of and guys, they haven't been arrested. The white heart, that's delusional thinking. That's, again, disassociation. When they say, oh, it's all a show. No. Gas prices are through the roof. Inflation's crazy. It's now $10 to buy a loaf of bread in Atlanta. People are going broke. That's not pretend. That's very real. That's come back. And sometimes I think people have such a hard time being in that reality of the fact that we are in this war right now, that they want to disassociate and think that, oh, no, it's okay. The good guys are in charge. Listen, you guys, the people who told you the good guys are in charge are the bad guys. It's a tactic. It's a Trojan horse, so that you disassociate, you don't pay attention, and then the New World Order walks right in through the front door, right? So
And the only thing that's going to change it is when you decide to apply the teachings of Christ and resurrect your own soul, your own consciousness, your own truth. That's what the resurrection is. It's the inner, it's the resurrection of your own soul. And you get to trust yourself, you get to love yourself, you get to acknowledge those around you who are doing it, you get to not judge those who aren't doing it, because we understand, think about a flower opening. You cannot rip a bud open a little, because you're gonna destroy it, right? Some people are like that, others are ready to bloom. A flower opens and it blooms in its own sweet time. And when it does, it's perfect. It's like the sweetest smell ever. Every person goes through that transformation. Every person goes from being a little egg, and then a worm, and then a pupa, and then a moth, and then, or whatever, and then the butterfly. So we look at that whole transformation. A caterpillar to the butterfly is the only creature on earth that completely changes its DNA when it goes through its transformation. Yeah. So we can look at that. We can look at that in life. And now also when you're looking at, by the way, how they would have taken that with, what's that program they use with the butterflies? Monarch program. So you see, they would have now emulated that. That's a perfect example of what our dark brethren do. They will take that, and they're very clever. So they're going to emulate that, but they're going to invert it, which is what they do when it comes to this
darkness can't
creating this crazy DNA and hybrids, when they start making hybrids in the homunculus and stuff like that. That's the dark side of the caterpillar transforming to the butterfly. So we have to understand that, that's what we are here to do. And when we look at people like Chad Daybell, and especially, because he was, Laurie Vallow was very ready to be influenced, right? She was so there for the influencing. She was ready and ripe, and having also.
She was having delusions about the end of time since she was a child. I do want to, Jessica, you just said something super interesting. You said, I've forgiven people, but I still think actually about what they did to me. Have I really forgiven them? I feel like I have. I just think about it a lot. I want to say something, Jessica, that might sound controversy. And this is something that comes from one of my favorite viral psychiatrists, a woman named Dr. Romney, who deals a lot with people who've been through abuse. It's not necessary to forgive. What's necessary is you having peace with what happened. Like Dr. Romney says, it's about you having peace with it. If forgiving them causes you more pain, then it's okay to have that boundary, right? It's okay to say, no, I don't forgive you for what you did to me, but I'm at peace with it. I'm at peace with it. I've healed from it, from the incident, right? So don't be too, and Dr. Romney says it a lot better, and it makes a lot more sense when she says it, but don't feel like you have to carry the burden of that, as long as you can be at peace with what happened, which is really, really hard to do. I know, I'm still I realized I had a lot of abuse in my childhood, and I've just realized that my parents didn't do what's called emotional coaching with me. And what I mean by that is, when children are little, the two big emotions that children are really hard for children are anger and fear. And so when I was a little kid, whenever I get angry about something, in a healthy house, a mother and father would sit down with the child and ask them what's wrong, what are they feeling, and talk them through it. And that validates the child's feelings. When I would get angry or upset when I was a kid, when I would try to tell my parents about how I was being abused, my mother would tell me, don't rock the boat. Just don't rock the boat. Accept the abuse, shut up, don't say anything. So I, at 41, am still working through a lot of that. But you know what? But in the flip side of that, if I had had a beautiful, wonderful, perfectly great childhood, I might not have gone to India. I might not have been searching so there's that friction that is I can be with a peace with it, that it led me to, might not be here sitting talking to you guys right now. So anyway, but so I just wanted to cover that forgiveness thing. Don't carry all that pressure for yourself. Just be at peace with it. So, but yeah, Chad, the delusions, And that's what really, and that comes into spiritual manipulation. When people have when you have a strong sense of self, it's going to be harder for you to be duped. It's going to be because you're not going to cling so tightly to a group. You're not going to cling so tightly to an ideology because you're going to feel comfortable within yourself, right? You're going to feel strong within yourself. You're going to have better relationships. You're going to have better boundaries. You're going to respect other people's boundaries. And so I think what's happening is that people don't go through that process, that hard process. And you're right, Shanti, it's because the church says what? The church says, Jesus will take care of it. Just lay all your problems on Jesus. You don't have to do anything. No, that's not what the original definition of Savior.
You know, when you're looking at that, when it says lay your problems at the cross, that's step one. It's basically letting go of your pain or sadness or whatever it is. But now there's 3 big steps further, actually, that you have to take to when it comes to true healing. You actually have to do the shadow work. You have to, it's not, and Kathy O'Brien says it so beautifully. So those of you who watched my interview with Kathy O'Brien, what an amazing lady. You know, she says you have no control over what somebody did to you. It's not your fault what people did to you as a child. Mm-hmm. But as an adult, the beauty about this now is you can take responsibility to change it. That's your duty. So, you know, and the shadow work will show you where you need. Because I always say, if you guys have heard me say this a million times, I look at my survivors and overcomers who are regulars on my channel as well. Those like Kathy O'Brien, Joanne Brice from Australia, Kerry Saint from Australia, Caleb Jade, who's very much, I mean, you know what I love about Caleb is that he's raw, he's out there, he's doing his healing in front of us all. He's showing us, and I mean, I'll tell you something, if anyone has been through lots of things, that man has. So, you know, these are said, I don't say other people aren't healers, but I'm saying this is where true healing comes from, where you've gone through that, you've literally been to hell and back, and you're now able to say, fine, I can drop it. I'll drop it at the cross if that's what you need to say.
Well,
but now...
What is dropping at the cross means? It means you're surrendering. You're surrendering.
Yeah, releasing, letting go. You're letting go, basically.
You're not disassociating. You're not running from it. You're not dropping it and running away. You're actually surrendering to, I have a problem here.
Letting go.
Into.
And it's the faith. It's having the faith to let things go because you know that's step one. Step two would be now, okay, now that I've let all of this crap go, how do I heal my body? How do I heal my mind? How do I, yes.
I can't take responsibility for that. I have to do that. And that's what real Christy, the church as a whole is just as corrupt as the government. 100%. Hypocrites, wolves in sheep's clothing, not good. In other words, bad. Do you know what's so funny? I think I've told you this, Shanti. Back when I lived in Los Angeles, I had this very gay friend. And he said once, he goes, you know, I think if Jesus came back today, he would look at the churches and just be like, so not what I meant, guys. So not what I meant. And I just think of not what I meant, guys.
Satanism and Christianity are the same side of
the same. Christianity is Satanism.
It's what, so we've got to be, you know, we've got to realize what that's about as well.
Yeah, Karen, absolutely. It's in, you don't need a book. That's the thing, people. And you know, you don't need a book to tell you who God is. Like that's again, find that sense of self. If you have a sense of self, you don't need a book to tell you who God is because you can rest within yourself and know who God is, right? You don't need a preacher or a rabbi or a prophet.
God has left a fragment of God's self in each and every one of us. And when we discover that fragment, we know we've discovered it. That's the beauty.
And Lisa D, control is hard to let go of, but it's essential because we've been programmed to follow the experts, follow the priest. You know, prophets, if any religion is talking about a prophet, it's satanic. That's a huge red flag for a satanic faith because in the positive polarity, there are no prophets. Everybody's a prophet. We're all equal. We're all equal, right? There's not one person that's been designated to speak for God. That's Satanism. That's not the true teachings of Christ. The original definition for Savior was one who saves himself. Yes, Jessica Gordon Maxwell was the person who originally woke me up. into that. That's a story for a different day. One of the best compliments I got, Jessica, this was years ago. One of the best compliments I ever got was, Brice, you're like the female younger Jordan Maxwell. And I was like, oh my God, thank you so much. Because he was a big time researcher. And he talks a lot about the Saturnalian Brotherhood, and he's the one that goes deeper into the definition of church. And yeah, so we have to kind of pull back and ask ourselves, can I rest within myself? Can I rest within my sense of self? Because when we have people like, now I want to kind of segue, with all that being said, to Chad Daybell's and his cult of near-death experiences. And I know I talked about this before. There's a great interview. It's a 3-part interview with Heather Daybell, who is Chad Daybell's sister-in-law. So not his biological sister. She married his brother. And she says in this interview that she thinks in one of Chad's supposed near-death experiences that all he did was do a belly flop and have an adrenaline rush. That he didn't die. And I happen to agree. So basically the premise of this group, and it's not just Chad Daybell saying this, it's this woman named Julie Rowe as well, is that they've had a couple of near-death experiences. It's really rare to have it's rare to have a near-death experience. It's super rare to have more than one. And all of these people, of course, have had more than one. And because they've had a near-death experience, according to them, their veil is ripped and they can see into the future and they can predict the end of times. And they know that they start talking about reincarnation and swinging their pendulum. And of course, all of them are all famous people from the past. Not one of them was just a freaking plumber, which is crazy. They're all, and that goes back to what I was saying. If you go on Telegram, there's like 5 different women in the truther community claiming to be the reincarnated Mary Magdalene, like 5 of them. This is delusional, right? Paul, though, I'm not a fan of Paul. Was a Satanist, Michelle. I would just be very careful with Paul. He was not a good person. But anyway, that's a story for a different day. So Chad had this elaborate near-death experience, which apparently made him then elite, right? He's a prophet. He knows. So people would come to him to get information, which, let's just say now that none of his prophecies have come true. None of Julie Rowe's, none of their prophecies has come true. So they're not hitting their targets. So I want to tell you guys, and Heather Daybell brought this up, and she brought up the fact that when you look into near-death experiences, usually it's the same, people have the same story, basically. And most people who have real near-death experiences, it changes them in a positive way, but it doesn't turn them into a psychopathic murdering cult leader like Chad Daybell. So I'm going to tell you guys, my grandfather, I've talked about this before, but I feel the need to tell this story again. My grandfather, my dad's dad, had a near-death experience when he was in his mid-40s. Now, I was not alive. I was born when he was in his 50s. So I didn't know my grandfather before. I only knew him post near-death experience. But from what I understand, there were subtle changes in his life. He was already a pretty integral person. He was a wild child, my grandfather. He was like drinking whiskey at 8 years old behind the school. Like the Watsons were fun. The Watsons were fun people. He was funny. He was like 6'5", big man. He was a chain smoker. And then in his mid-40s, he had a heart attack. And he was rushed to the emergency room. And I know this story because I heard it so many times. He died for the second time when I was 34 years old. So let's say, I don't remember actually learning this story. So I heard it over and over, and it never changed. The story that my grandfather told never changed. My grandmother's perception of what happened never changed. Not once. So, whereas Chad's stories changes and gets more and more and more elaborate as time. My grandfather's never did. It was very simple. He had a heart attack in his mid-40s. My grandmother, she had these 3, my dad, who was a teenager, and his sisters, my grandmother rushes him to the hospital. My grandfather was laying on the table where he flatlined. And my grandfather says he remembers hovering above his body and seeing the doctors talking and listening to their conversation, the doctors and the nurses talking. Then my grandfather said that all of a sudden this light appeared. And he would always tell you that it was not a light he could explain. It's not a human light. He could never, I can't explain it to you what it looks like. The best way is just a light, which you hear from a lot of people. And he kind of was engulfed by the light. And he said it just felt so good. It was just the most magical experience he'd ever had. And then he says he saw Jesus walking towards him. In my mind, I think it's whoever you feel more comfortable with is the person that you see. And Jesus came up to my grandfather and said, Ed, you have to go back now. This is not your time. You have to go back. And my grandfather said, I don't want to go back. I want to stay here. And he had, of course, my grandfather, this whiskey drinking wild child, would have an argument with Jesus. And Ed said to Jesus, Marianne, my grandmother, she's got this. She can handle it. She can handle the kids. I want to stay here. And Jesus said, no, it's not your time. You have to go back now. And the next thing my grandfather remembered was waking up in the hospital bed. Well, the next thing, the first thing he said was, oh my God, I met Jesus, which Heather said that. She said, you know, you would think if Chad had a near-death experience, the first thing he would have talked about coming out of it, but no, he didn't talk about it till years later. So the doctors apparently were a little skeptical of my grandfather making these claims, and until my grandfather saying, no, you said this and you said that, where he could tell them the conversation that the nurses and the doctors were having when he was technically dead. And the doctors and the nurses were like, there's no way that you could have heard that. You were dead. And my grandfather was like, well, I did. I was watching you. I was hovering above, watching you guys talk. So after that experience, my grandfather, for about a couple of years, was unable to work because he had to have open heart surgery, just recovering from this thing that had happened to him. But what had changed with my grandfather, from what I understand, is he lost his fear of death. That was the big shift that happened for my grandfather. Now, they say, theoretically, that every single fear we have can be traced back to a fear of death. If you don't fear death anymore, then you're unstoppable. So my grandfather, at this point, he had been an engineer before, but he changed his career. He actually ended up opening up a pillow factory where he copyrighted all these pillows. He ended up making millions in his later life. And in that money, they stayed in their same house. I mean, literally, the house that before they died was still decked out in 70s gear. Like, it was still like shag carpet. Like, they didn't change anything about their house, but he would take that money. And I didn't know this until after he died in 2017, the final time. I was 34. And I learned this afterwards because he never talked about this. So my grandfather owned this pillow factory. And this is just something he started doing. I think he was so affected by his understanding now, a deeper understanding of life. He would hire illegal immigrants in his pillow factory. And then what he would do immediately was get them an immigration lawyer. He would pay for them an immigration lawyer, pay for them to get their paperwork done so that they could be legal. And then he would pay to have their family brought to America too. Because that was his service to people. Is he's making all this money now, he's going to use it to help other people better their lives and give other people opportunities to have this American dream. And I didn't know that. He didn't go around telling people that. He did. Jojo, that's another thing. There's documentary out where people talk about that. A lot of people have to go to therapy after it because they just don't like materialistic stuff anymore.
I love that though. I have to say, Jojo, it's great because that's actually why I'm putting this up here, because I don't know if anyone else has. I've not had a near-death experience, but my late partner actually did, and it was amazing because he had his in 2014. And then he passed away in 2020. And it was like the last 6 years of his life, 5.5 years actually. It was like he was living on borrowed time. It was like he righted all the wrongs. He came to full conclusion about who he was and why he was here. Very spiritual guy, very beautiful soul, Dom was. And, you know, so when you talk about that, he lost that fear of not having. He, you know, so it's and we don't just hear it from there. I'm just using that as an example as well. But lots of times you hear people talk about that, and the true authentic way, their vibration raises to a much higher level. So they become much more loving. They become a lot more understanding. They right the wrongs they've had to do, you know, and it's like, they've I'm very glad I did get the extra time with him, most definitely.
I'm so glad. Listen, my grandfather, I'm so glad he was around because I felt more love. I am so proud to be Ed Watson's granddaughter. Like he was so, I mean, you felt protected around him. You felt safe. He had such an incredible, after that experience, he did so much good in the community that at his actual funeral, it was packed to the brim. Like people came from all over to his actual funeral. And yeah, so Jojo, I think the same thing, like my grandfather, even though he started making a lot of money, he didn't spend it on stuff for him and my grandmother. They didn't upgrade their house. They didn't do anything like that. He spent it on people who needed it. He spent it on his grandkids. He would do stuff for us all the time, but he didn't do anything for fancy for him or my grandmother. It wasn't about that. It was his ability to service people, to help other people. Because my grandfather was I come from very smart people. I will say that all four of my grandparents are all both of my grandmothers went to university. My grandfather was a very, very smart man, and he was really good at business. And so he used that God-given gift of being able to create a good business to then be able to have the money to show love to his employees, to help them start their new lives. And my boyfriend met my grandfather when he was starting to decline in health for the final time. And after the first time my boyfriend met my grandfather, he walked out of their house and he was like, there is something magnetic about your grandfather. He was like, your grandfather just exudes wisdom. Like, I don't know what it is. I was like, it's because he had a near-death experience. Let me tell you the story. Because and you know what else my grandfather would do? As his peers started to get sick and die, like if they had cancer or whatever, my grandfather frequently would get called to go sit by somebody's deathbed. It's going to make me emotional. He would go sit by their dead. And I only found this out again after he had died. Like nobody shared this stuff until after he was actually really gone. And he would go sit by people's deathbeds and tell them that it was okay and that they're going to be okay. And he would share his experience over and over again and that they were going to be okay. And death is nothing to fear. At my grandfather's sister's funeral, my great aunt Jane, she died a few years before he died. We were up in Tennessee at her funeral and we get there and my grandfather he was in a wheelchair at this point, was sitting in a wheelchair and just laughing hysterically like he was not mourning at all. And he kept saying, you guys, Jane is fine. Jane is fine. She's so happy right now. She had lung cancer. He's like, she's free of pain. She's so happy. You guys don't understand. She's happy. Death is not something to be feared. And I will remember, like, I was out to lunch with them, and this was literally like 5 years to the day before he died. I remember sitting at lunch with him and my grandmother, and he looked up and he goes, I think I have about 5 years left. Just matter of factly, like no fear. And he was right. And I will tell you something, my grandmother, my dad's mom, my grandfather's wife, my grandmother, who is Shanti, you would have loved her. She would have loved you. She was so woo-woo. She hid books on reincarnation under the bed from my grandfather. She tried to teach me to meditate when I was 8 years old. Whenever I'd come home from India, she would pull me in the kitchen and she'd be like, tell me all the secrets. Tell me everything. Show me everything you learned. But he adored my grandmother. And when she started to get Alzheimer's. And so my grandfather knew that he was going to be going before her. His health was already starting to fail. And so he went ahead and moved her into a home, a really swanky, like, listen, the last few years of her life are like a party. I mean, she was just living it up. It was very swanky with nurses and they had restaurants and kind of little apartments. My grandfather moved in with her so that she could get used to it before he passed away. He passed away in 2017. My grandmother passed away in 2021. So for these few years that my grandmother was living without my grandfather, because she has Alzheimer's, she would occasionally get confused and she would ask where Ed was. And they would have to remind her that was hard, that he had passed away because, the day that she actually passed away, the nurses shared this with my family afterwards. She kept saying all that morning, she was like, I'm going to see Ed today. She kept saying, I'm going to see Ed today. She was so excited because she was going to see Ed today. Just so excited. And the nurses were like, that's great. They thought it was her Alzheimer's. Like, that's great, Marianne. That's great, Marianne. Well, then she passed away that afternoon. And the day that my grandmother passed away was actually their wedding anniversary. And she was already seeing beyond the veil that my grandfather was there, that he was going to come get her and bring her into the beyond. And so I'm getting emotional. So these are, and if you look at most near-death experiences, they're very similar to that, right? Like Jojo was saying, like you have, it changes you. It doesn't make you become a better person. You become more loving. You become more compassionate. You see the beauty in everyone. You don't care so much about materialistic stuff. But with Chad Daybell, we see the opposite. We see somebody that has this elaborate. My grandfather did not see, you know, we talk about the book Visions of Glory, and there's some parts in the Hidden True Crime podcast where they talk about this book, where all of a sudden the person who's telling the story can like read people's thoughts from the beyond. And from what I understand, that's not what happens to most people, because there's also privacy, right? There's consent, you know. My grandfather heard conversations. He heard people actually talking to each other, and that's what he relayed back to the doctors and the nurses, not thoughts, actual conversations, right? So when we look at what Chad does with these near-death experiences, and as it's said that when he first starts talking about these near-death experiences, they're years after the fact, which most people, again, when they have a near-death experience, the first thing they tell you, like my grandfather, the first thing he said was, I saw Jesus. Like if you had a near-death experience and saw your grandmother, your dead grandmother, you would come back and be like, oh my God, I saw grandmother Maxine. You know, like it's so impactful that you would immediately, like I said, my grandfather died when I was 34. He had his near-death experience before I was born. I don't remember learning about his experience. I just knew about it because they talked about it all the time. It was their story never changed. So what Chad is doing is he's creating, in my opinion, he's creating this delusional world where he is some superpower hero of God. He's the one that's going to lead the 144,000 to Rexburg, Idaho, which I mean, no offense, Idaho, but is that going to be the last remaining place on earth? Like, I don't think so, you know, and that Lori was his goddess, that they were gods and goddesses themselves, which that does come from Mormonism, which we're going to get into it. That does come from Mormonism, the idea that you're a goddess or a god or a goddess, and that you now have the power. So like Chad Daybell, and this again, we're nearest the truth or community. Chad Daybell believed that he had this superpower, and Lori too, of being able to read people's souls. So he had this measuring scale where he could say, you're 1.2 light or you're 1.2 dark. And so if you were beyond repair, exactly, Charmaine, he was manipulating people, but I think he also was manipulating himself as well. So if you were like, because Tylee, the 16-year-old who did not like Chad Daybell, she was rated as a 4.7 dark soul. So that means that she was a zombie. Her soul had left and a demon had taken over her body. So all of a sudden, Chad becomes the arbiter of whether somebody lives or dies. He now has the power and if you look at how many deaths surround these two, I would not be surprised if by the end of this mess, they're not labeled as serial killers. That's just my opinion, though. That's my speculation.
There are serial killers, for sure they are. Yeah. But again, you know, for me, that's really just whatever happened to him or whatever he thinks happened to him, you know, the way I see it, he's had some attachment or some Raphael working through him that's claimed his body, and that has, you know, if anyone was a zombie,
isn't that the irony? Isn't that the irony of this whole thing? That
exactly. So, you know, that's the way I see it, that there's definitely been some dark creature of the night entity that has claimed Chad's body and that is working through him doing these atrocious things, because that's how it works in the arcane. I'm not going to say the occult, because the occult simply means hidden knowledge. Anything that is non-physical really is about occult, or as I say, hidden knowledge. It doesn't mean it's bad.
Nope.
But in my opinion, you know, whatever happened to Chad Daybell and whatever, or let's say he did have a near-death experience. I mean, none of us can prove that he didn't. So let's say he did have 2 near-death experiences. I do believe, you know, as we've spoken about, and, you know, there have been a lot of people who have had those experiences. They come back and it makes better people of them, right?
Yeah.
So, but with him, obviously, it didn't. It became self-serving. It became, you know, service to self. And it became highly manipulative because with him, as you say, but again, I'm telling you, that's the Mormon indoctrination, the Mormon church indoctrination.
God with the Mormons. And I want to quickly, Carol, that's flattering you had a dream about me, but if it's a shape-shifting spirit, just before you go to bed at night, just say I revoke permission for any spirits to use or impersonate people I like or trust or friends of mine to try to, I would just, yeah, because I don't think I went anywhere last night. So I don't even remember. I slept so hard last night. And I was up at 2:30 this morning to teach. So if it was past 2:30, I was already up. So yeah, so just put up a boundary and say you can't mimic any people in my life. I would just say that. But yeah. No, I will say too,
you know, it's a time where, you know, where and I always maintain this, when you're in your truth, when you're in your power, and power is not something I'm bigger, stronger, got bigger muscles, got a bigger sword than you, and I'm going to chop your head off, whatever. That's not the type of power I'm talking about. Power comes in the sense of kindness. It comes in the sense of compassion, understanding. It doesn't mean you're perfect. Doesn't mean you don't have a bad day.
Absolutely.
It means you recognize when you have a bad day and you resolve
you're sturdy and you're sturdy in yourself and you can take the hits. I do want to say too another thing about to end on this, and this is a personal, you know, Chad, the problem is we have this vision of like elite people, that we think there are elite people in the world. There's the bloodlines, the elite bloodlines, the people, you know, even in the truth, quote unquote, truther community, we have somehow think Trump is better than us and can do these things, or JFK Jr. is going to come back to save us. Well, around the same time that I learned about this group on Telegram, I also started to be accused of being Princess Diana in a deep fake mask. And at first I laughed about it, but then it kept going. And I got so upset because it's not true. It's delusional. My name is, I am who I say I am. And I got mad and I was like, so you mean to tell me that you're willing to erase all of the hard work that I've done and give credit, the hard work I've done, credit it to a celebrity? Because in your mind, an average Joe, an average peasant, couldn't possibly do this much research on their own. It started to really piss me off. So this idea that only elite people can do things, only elite people, and I am not. I am freaking, my name is Brice Elizabeth Watson. I'm 41 years old. I'm younger than William. I'm not Princess Diana at all. There's no mask on me. There's no mask here. Shanti, you know, you've seen me. Well, you've met my boyfriend. You've seen our dog. Like, this is not a facade. But that's that delusion, right? That we live in this world where these people are going to come back, these elite people, and they're going to save us. And the average Joe can't possibly do that. It's funny, you know, I was laughing when you said that Caleb says, I can't believe you guys don't know that. I laughed too, because I wasn't brought up in the arcane, but I researched this stuff and I came to my own conclusions. That I researched King James. It's not even my own conclusions. I looked at the facts, you know? So Brice, holy shit, you look good. Oh, I thought you meant because of Diana being like in her 60s. No. Well, thank you, Jessica. I appreciate that. You know, but it's we have to take that power back, right? We have to stop thinking that someone's going to come save us, or if we're relying on somebody else to save us, then we've automatically given our power away. We've automatically become susceptible to a cult leader, to a false prophet, if you want to say it that way. And the biggest false prophet out there is the church and the Bible. The Bible is a huge false prophet because the Bible was written by the Freemasons, you guys. Like, hands down, the King James Bible, the NIV, whatever Bible you got in your house, that was written by the Freemasons.
Although I'm going to say there's a lot of truth in the Bible. Yeah. There's a lot of,
you have to dig and find it.
What they've done is they've mixed truth with, and again, those of you who've listened to the Arbitel, Magic of the Arbitel of the Ancients that we did with Caleb. If you guys haven't watched that, please do so. That we did 5-part series on that, where they would take that and the scriptures, they're beautiful ancient scriptures, and it's how they distort them. And Caleb goes through that with us, and he explains where, because of course that's what he worked with. So it explains where they're tripping you up. And as I said, the last section was really the truth. That's where they tell you, when you have the true Christ in your heart, you cannot be fooled.
Yeah. Well, and I would say too, like, if you go back and just read the Old Testament, just read the story of Abraham, take the idea of him being some magical, venerated person and just read about him. It's sickening. What Abraham does is the same thing the Cabal does. Blood rituals. He traffics women. He forces women into intimacy. There's a whole story of him RIP-ing a woman and we're supposed to venerate that person.
Yeah. No, there's, I mean, if you just look at, you go back to the ancient times, how many of these statues you're seeing wherever of these guys eating babies and throwing babies into the fire and stuff like that? I mean, this has been going on since forever. So whenever you have, and I mean, and I'm going to say this again, the true God, the God of love, requires absolutely no sacrifice. God requires mercy. Mercy for everything and anything. The only time that we are allowed to kill is in self-defense, and if it's a mercy killing.
Yeah, that's it. That's the 2 times. And that's not murder. Murder is different. Murder is
thou shalt not kill. I mean, thou shalt not kill. I mean, he did not say thou shalt not murder, right?
No. Yeah.
Kill includes everything. And so let's look at that. I mean, let's look at that. When we're looking at really, in my opinion, the true God requires love, requires compassion, requires mercy. Everything here has a right to life. We do not have the right to take anyone's life, in my opinion. So when we actually look at that and we really sit with that and we contemplate that, we ruminate that, we will see.
My Southern Lifestyle and friends, the elites they're still alive, honey. They haven't gone anywhere. They're still alive. To think they're all dead.
We will be the ones, when we literally do that within ourselves, to say no, because really all we need to do is say no. That's all. That's it. Just say no. If you say no, then no is no. That's it. There's no, when we no longer choose to be part of that, no, thank you.
Oh, thank
you.
I
won't be going to, no.
There were a bunch of Christians trying to out at Piedmont Park this past weekend with signs, because we had a big festival going on. You're going to hell. And I thought, what am I going to say if they try to approach me? I'm just going to look at them and be like, no, thanks. I'm not a Satanist. I don't want your I'm not a Satanist. Lisa D, to answer your question, I would refer you to the Law of One. And we forgot to talk about it. We'll have to do it remind us to do it on Monday's show. I was going to talk about a Reddit chain in reference to the elite's diet, what they actually eat. And coming back to the killing of animals and all that kind of stuff. But Lisa D, so the Law of One talks about, to polarize positive, you have to be 51% service to others. To polarize negative, you have to be 94% service to self. That's why they're so brutal. But they do have, you're responsible for all your karma. So even if you kill a spider, you're responsible for it. Now, but they do have what they call laws of forgiveness. So if you accidentally kill a spider, if you accidentally step on something, or it's
always the intention. You got to look at the intention behind it. There's something. I mean, you can there will be a doctor or surgeon in a hospital with a knife trying to give open heart surgery to someone, and the person dies on the operating table, or there'll be someone in the back streets taking a knife and stabbing the heart away. Both died by a knife of somebody else in the heart, so to speak. But what was the intention behind each action?
Exactly.
And yes, I mean, none of us, that we will always make mistakes, and yes, there is the law of forgiveness. There is the law of understanding. Every soul, whether it's a bug or a spider or whatever, every soul has its purpose and its journey as well. And that's why I say, the day that we cross over, everything that you've harmed or done anything hectic to, you've got to actually answer to that being soul. And that's why I'm glad I'm not a hunter, because when you're looking at hunters killing for sport, then if it was a done with the right intent, so you say, okay, I chose you to eat meat because my family was starving, and you did a prayer and that sort of thing before, that's a different story. It's a different connection. When you're looking at how the Bushmen here, I mean, they do like a whole dance before, and then they call on the spirit of the animal, and that animal, they will connect with it in the dance before, and then they know that animal has agreed to be their food.
Yeah.
So then they know that. And it's how you do it. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. Well, and again, I don't,
even with eating meat, like the Law of One talks about this, like we are not supposed to be eating meat. I think we're going to talk about more of that next week with the wheat diet. Meat is not good for us. All these medical stuff that say you need, that's all Rockefeller stuff. Like that's not. So the Law of One basically says, though, and this is, it's every individual is different. So if you grow up in a family like a Hindu family, like or in India where it's 80% vegetarian, the stakes are going to be higher for you if you decide to eat meat, because you're culturally were raised to know to do the right thing, to not eat meat. But if you come from the Western world, there's going to be a little bit more there's going to be more forgiveness with you because you were raised on a culture of eating meat. Now, for someone like Shanti and me, who are from the Western world, but have spent a lot of time in India studying this, the fact that we've now been introduced to this concept that eating meat is actually negative polarity, the stakes are higher for us. So I've now made I made the decision at 14 to stop eating meat. So now that is it's not going to be as much forgiveness for me as it might be for like Billy Bob down the street who's never been to India or studied any spiritual text, right? So it comes down to the fact that when you know better, you do better. When you mess up, you just course correct. And I will say, I saw you use the word, Jessica, you said, oh, great, now I have to confess to every bug I squished and repent, LOL. I don't actually really like that word repent. I think repent, it's not even repenting. It's just course correcting. Right? Like I think that the church, someone will tell you, Jessica, don't worry. Just live your life if you want to be service to others, remember to graduate service to others. You have to be 51% service to others. Guess what that means? 49% of you could be a complete asshole. As long as 51% of you as long as the majority of your actions. And when I think about service to others, it's like, it's not just doing things for other people or helping the world. It's having a level of empathy in you, having compassion for people, being able, when I was driving to the shallow this morning, I saw a cat had been hit by a car on the road, and I got so emotional for not just for the cat. I mean, I know the cat's fine, but for like the family, for, having that feeling of pain for other people, of wanting to hug other people, of wanting to be there for other people. It's like, I know Mr. Fox has talked about this. We get so mad at Hollywood. But Hollywood, if you take the controllers out of it, the craft of performance art, the craft of music, that's all service to others based crafts, right? You're there to entertain people, to connect with people. We teach yoga. We're service to other people.
Janine, I agree with you. There's 3 things I kill: mosquitoes, ticks, and fleas. Sorry.
Yes.
Anything that's my blood cannot be trusted.
Hey, well, that's you protecting yourself, right? That's you defending.
And then every time I kill a mosquito, I say, okay, go for a run, and when you come back, become a little dragonfly.
Yeah. Well, I would say, Jessica, if you consider going vegetarian, this is my thing on it. I don't believe in going cold turkey. I don't think that's good for you. So if you do consider going vegetarian, this is what I tell my students. First you cut pork out, which is probably important to cut out because they apparently have some human DNA in them. Then you cut red meat out. Just do it slowly, like adapt yourself so that you're all still taking care of yourself.
Absolutely. Take it. And I want to tell you, if you had to look at chicken under a microscope, you would be horrified at the amount of creepy crawlies in
Yeah.
chicken. So,
Yeah.
Carol, I love what you've said there, by the way. You all inspired me to stop eating meat. You know what? I got to tell you, I'm an animal communicator and I teach animal communication workshops. And over the years, it's been such a pleasure to hear students, one after the other, tell me that once they've started doing animal communication workshops, how they've stopped eating meat. And that's the thing. It's like, how do you eat something that you speak to? You know, it's just it's a very difficult thing to do. And also, however, you know, dairy is equally as bad, because the dairy supports the slaughter industry. And I still eat some dairy products.
I do too. You know,
Not a lot.
my teacher in India spoke about this because he's a dairy eater, and somebody asked me, he goes, you know, in India, you see them, they're milking their cows by hand. It's not, you're not being violent, but in America, Dana, I would be careful with that. That's kind of that delusional thinking we were talking about, that Hollywood are white hats. They are actors by day, vampire hunters by night. I would be really careful. That's kind of that delusional thinking that we were talking about. You know,
No, Nancy, no. Snakes are not evil. Please, they're not.
just remember, Nancy, if you're, I don't know where you are in the world, but here in the Southeast, we got a lot of snakes. And we would have to learn that rhyme as a kid. Red on yellow can kill a fella. Red on black, you better step back. Just if you see a snake, don't, you know, there was one day we were down at the river with our dog, and our dog was swimming, and there was a poisonous snake by us. But with most animals, if you don't bother it, it won't bother you. So we just left it. We kept the dog away. We just left
snakes. I love them. When I was like, I often tell the story when I was in Thailand, living in Thailand. There was once I was walking and I had my flip flops on, and I was walking up 2 or 3 steps, and then I realized I had needed to take my flip flops off. So I stepped back, and as I stepped back on the second step, I felt this thing on my toe, and I looked down, and there was a black cobra, and her head was up. And as I looked down, I said, "Oh, hello." And she immediately slithered away. Now, anything else, and on the same day, I mean, you find lots of very lethal snakes in Thailand. The same day, I was riding, my friend and I, Olav, where he was on his bike, I was on mine. And we were probably maybe 20 meters apart. And in between us, the snake came running, sliding across the road. And honestly, it's like I stopped, slowed down enough to literally see it. And it was just like, if I hadn't, I would have probably driven over it, or it might have bitten me. I don't know. Anything is possible, you know. But honestly, snakes are amazing. They symbolize transformation as well. And Carolyn, I know that you did the animal communication workshop.
And I'll answer Dana's. So Dana, yeah, the cabal can't create, the darkness can't create, only light can. So when you're looking, I worked and lived in Hollywood for a long time. So you have to remember, you're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of people that work in this industry: the writers, the actors, the set creators, everything. So majority of Hollywood is not part of the cabal. Majority of Hollywood is not. They're just doing their jobs. The cabal is just a few puppet masters on top of the pyramid, but that doesn't mean they're white hats. Okay. So we have to, I actually don't believe there are any white hats. Okay. Because if there are, the white hats are not asking for our consent. And in a positive polarity, they need our consent. So I would just be very careful. Just because somebody's not a black hat does not mean that they are a white hat. All right. So I would just be very, very careful with that mindset that there is some like imaginary force out there of military that's going to come save you. I would just be very careful with that line of thinking, because that's disassociating you from the reality of the situation that we're in. And just remember, you guys, like, again, the cabal is freaking smart. They're so smart, right? They're not dead. They're not arrested. They can't arrest politicians in America without telling the American people. That's against the law, right? But what they do is they decoy people into communities, and they try to get us to think that the good guys are in control, so that we get into this delusional thinking. And the next thing you know, the New World Order walks right in the front door. We're smarter than that. I know you guys are smarter than that. Like, You know, and that's why when I started to figure this out, like in 2021, I feel very grateful that I had all this time in India beforehand working on myself, because it kind of brought me back to reality, right? That wait a minute, no, nothing of this. These people over here are saying that these good guys are in control and they're secretly doing this stuff, but I know that if they're good guys, they would be getting our consent, because it affects our life personally. So I would just you know, yes, Dana, we save ourselves. We have to save ourselves. We have to. No one else is coming to do it for you. And that's your privilege, you guys. Like that shouldn't be scary. That's your privilege, that you get to save yourself. That's your privilege, because you're that powerful. You're that amazing.
Powerful creatives.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, guys, I'm going to call it a day or a night, whatever. Nancy, I agree. Just to answer your question, they're going to do that, and they are obviously sneaky. They're going to look for food. That's nature. Unfortunately, nature is quite brutal. And yes, I agree. And if you can be there helping Mama Bird, for sure, help her. But I wouldn't say kill it. You know, that's where we animal communication is so amazing, because we realize you actually can communicate with the animal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was talking with my friend here. I don't know if you guys know the green mamba. It's one of the most poisonous snakes in Africa. She had green mamba coming into her house, and I just spoke to the queen mamba, and I said to her, right, there's your path, stay away. And after that, and I said, don't kill the snakes, because the more you kill them, the more they're going to infiltrate. So don't do it. Just have respect. We're all living creatures and beings, and we can all co-create in the same place. Okay, everybody, thank you so much. Love the show.
We'll see what happens this week in the Chad Daybell trial. So we're going to talk about next week.
Yeah, so let's absolutely, you know, let's not be delulu. Let's kind of like keep our wits about.
Don't be the Lulu.
Yeah, let's keep our wits about us. We all beautiful, incredible, intelligent beings. We all here at this time together. We've all chosen to be here together. And I love that, Carolyn. Speak to the king snake at the back of my property. You see, there you go. And she handled exactly. You see, that's what you do. That's what animal communication brings you, you see. Then you don't have to kill anything. And there are also ways of doing it. Anyway, but we will have that story on another day. So everybody, stay blessed, stay cool, stay kind, stay yogi. God bless you all. Take good care, and we shall see you hopefully tomorrow. Caleb has been pretty sick at the moment as well. I'm not sure how he's going to feel tomorrow. Check if you don't see me put up a show, that means he's not going to do a show. Otherwise, if there is a show, I will advertise and I will do a promo for it. Okay, God bless you all. Take good care. Just enjoy life. Be happy.
Don't be Chad Daybell. Just don't be. Just ask yourself, would Chad Daybell do this? And if it's yes, do the opposite.
Exactly. God bless you all.
Bye, guys.